it seems like we can get caught up in this loop of our story and kind of we kind of stay in this kind of victim mentality of the story. And I've wanted to see if we can have a conversation where we can empower people to help change that story. So maybe if we can just start off like maybe describing what a story is, and then we
Well,
can continue on from that.
first, I would like to digress and let you know and your listeners that I left psychotherapy
Okay.
because that practice, because I did not feel like I was helping anybody help themselves or even have the opportunity to look ahead and think about what they wanted that would be in the future. I think the practice of psychotherapy, the basis of it is to spend so much time looking back that it becomes the very excuse for people why they do not want to move forward. They feel they can't. And
Wow.
when I understood that and knew I needed to start doing something very different with clients, I left that practice. I studied in travel, and now I do something very different, which is help people to help themselves from getting to where they are to where they want to be without spending too much time at all looking back.
Yeah.
And
I love that. Sorry.
that that in itself, I think, is magical.
Yeah.
So
You know what? It's so refreshing to hear that because my own personal experience in psychotherapy, I believe that they keep you stuck in your story
yes.
and the
Well,
repetitive.
they don't keep us stuck, but that is the business model for the practice. Um, and that's okay. There are many people that feel that psychotherapy either has helped them or is helping them, and that is wonderful. However, I was not feeling like that is something that I wanted to continue doing with my clients.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I've been to the gamut of psychotherapy, and it's interesting that your approach when it's like, yeah, because when I look back to it, it was really about that idea where I just felt like it was like a repetitive cycle that I just keep rehashing the past all the time, and I keep going back into my past, and I just felt, there were some benefits. Granted, it got me here today, but there was a lot of negative stuff and very, um, negative, very deeply negative stuff that came about through therapy too that wasn't available. That was what happened to me during my sessions. But yeah, let's talk about stories and changing that because I know through your information on your webpage and you talk about that, and I think we can start about that, and then we can work on all the different other things that you have too as well. Like there's so many things that I found on your webpage and topics, even in your little book that you have there too as well that we can touch on. But I figure we start
Okay.
with this and then we can continue on. I think that's could be very powerful for a lot of people today.
Okay. So I think that most people don't even know what their story is. It becomes like a mantra that they just repeat incessantly over and over again without really understanding what they are conveying. And so the most important thing is how are you feeling when you're telling your story? Like, and is it really true? Because a lot of times we have heard so many things from family of origin, from teachers, from whoever, and we've picked that up and just assumed that it was true and ran with it. So, how can we fact check? How can we understand what we're saying? How can we ask ourselves, like, is there an update? Is this even true? And how am I feeling when I'm telling people whatever it is that I'm telling them? And I think when people have that opportunity, they become aware that, oh my goodness, like this is probably so outdated, or I never thought that I could ask myself, like, is this really true? A lot of it is stuff that we have just dragged from earlier days to our now. But usually 90% of it is not true.
Yeah.
So that's a good place for people to start.
Yeah, I think so too. Is really understanding that. Like, I mean, that's when I'm listening to you, it's like, yeah, geez, I feel like I'm back in therapy in some ways. It's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, because you think about your family of origin, and you never get to question, is it true or not? Because we have these sense of beliefs that it must be true because X, Y, and Z happened. That
Right.
must be true. But it's I when I'm listening to you, it's like, yeah, I kind of, you can kind of call BS on that. It's kind of bullshit. Like no, no, wait a minute. That doesn't seem right. But
But
yeah,
the thing is, we don't have to make it wrong. We can understand it, because what I then do is ask people to look at that story from their right here and now perspective. And if you're able to do that, you really see it very differently, because we're not small anymore. We're not victims. We're in a very different place with ourselves in our life. And that really gives the story levity, because we're explaining to ourselves from a very different perspective of where we are now. And sometimes the beauty of that is we're able to see, and I think it takes a little while, that whatever that story was then and whoever those people were, that journey got us to where we are right here and now. And that might be our superpower. So, how can we look at whatever all that stuff was? And usually it doesn't feel good when we think about it, but how can we reframe it and turn it into a strength in which we're actually able to like thank those people, like, wow, if like I wasn't there then, and maybe I wouldn't be where I am now. And I'm in a really good place right now.
yeah. So okay, let's talk about some techniques about that because you know, how can we really start to reframe that? Do we have to kind of look back into our story or look at our story? Okay, this happened to me, that happened to me, and kind of move away from the whole victim mentality and reframe it, like you were saying. And what are some of the things we can do about that?
Well, I think first to at least understand what the story is. Because sometimes we can just change the tone of the story. Maybe we can just change a few of the words of the story so that we can turn what we thought and how we felt about something that was so awful into something that really is empowering in our now.
Okay.
So if you're a super intuitive person now, but you're not really aware of that, but you're able to go back and say just momentarily, wow, I really knew that something uncomfortable was going on. Wow, that's great. You are right then and there confirming to yourself that you knew something, that you did trust yourself, but you kind of knew. And now you're able to see like, wow, I did know. And I didn't question it, but I can now. I can use my intuition. I know a lot about how I feel in certain situations, but I've never allowed myself to believe it. But okay, I believe it now.
Yeah.
Like
So how do
what I
we
thought was happening, it actually happened.
so how do we reinforce that?
I think to remember, because I do think we are our own greatest resource. And most people have never even heard that before, because they spend most of their life looking outside of themselves for verification and information. So think about all the times that you knew, you have no idea how or why you knew, but you knew. You didn't follow that intuition, but you knew. And I have never heard anybody say, I should not have listened to myself. But you hear people all day long say, I should have listened to myself. So you have a knowing. And if you're able to tap into that knowing, that inner voice, that inner guidance, I think that that is very reassuring.